Today, the world's energy supply is largely based on fossil fuels and nuclear power. These sources of energy will not last forever and have proven to be contributors to our environmental problems. Recently, President Obama has set out a new energy-saving plan for America, nuclear energy. But is nuclear energy really the way forward? Renewable sources of energy such as biomasses, solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal are self-replenishing, clean, and currently contribute 19% of the world's energy supply. The Greenpeace report, called The Economics of Nuclear Power, states that every dollar spent on energy efficiency and renewable sources of electricity, such as wind and solar, was 7 to 10 times further in displacing global greenhouse gases than the dollars spent going nuclear. This brings to my major claim. Renewable energy is a safer and better solution than nuclear energy to avoid global warming and preserve fossil fuels on Earth. My first claim is, nuclear power is based on a limited source called uranium, and the use of nuclear power creates incalculable risk that cannot be insured. My second claim is, creating nuclear energy is more expensive and time-consuming than renewable energy. And my third claim is, the production of nuclear energy results in the destruction of the natural environment and has long-term consequences. Coming back to my first claim, the Union of Concerned Scientists has been pointing out several liabilities since the past couple of years. Building nuclear power plants is not cost-effective. Reprocessing used nuclear fuel, as proposed by the Bush administration, is extremely dangerous, increases the amount of bomb-usable plutonium, creates additional terrorist targets, and encourages nuclear proliferation. Workers in this process are subjected to background radiation 1,000 times more than the average background radiation. The average radiation dose to people living within 10 miles of the plant was equal to that of a chest X-ray. A study undertaken last year by Roger Levin at the Penn State University of Medicine looked at the incidence of thyroid cancer in residents surrounding 3 Mile Island nuclear facility. My second claim is, creating nuclear energy is more expensive and time-consuming than renewable energy. Dr. Riccio, in a recent Greenpeace report, found that nuclear power plant construction can run up to 300% over budget and on average takes 4 years longer to build than planned. The last nuclear plant to be built in the country will cost between $7 to $8 billion and took 23 years to build. The report, Solar and Nuclear Cost, compiled by John O. Blackburn, former Chancellor of Duke University, states that solar energy costs are projected to continue its decline over the coming decade, while nuclear costs are expected to rise further. It also states that electricity generated from solar PV is now being sold by commercial developers at 14 cents or less per kilowatt, while nuclear plants in the planning stages will be incapable of offering electricity cheaper than 14 to 18 cents per kilowatt. My third claim is, the production of nuclear energy results in the destruction of the natural environment and has long-term consequences. In the 1960s, the Atomic Energy Commission funded research to investigate the effects of radiation on people, plants, and animals. A number of recent studies entitled The Biological Effects of Atomic Radiation and Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation reported several effects of nuclear energy on air, water, ground, and the biosphere. In getting the ore out of the ground and processed to a point where it can be used as a fuel, we have contaminated many acres of land in mining and processing, exposed hundreds of workers to the effects of increased radioactivity, transported the material through towns, cities, and ports where there is eventual likelihood of a spill and a possible contamination of a residential area. So, before we put into a reactor to make power, wake up people, there are viable alternatives that do not require radioactive elements, the polluting of our natural environment, and the killing of ourselves and our children by exposure to toxic elements. Renewable sources of energy are an essential part of an overall strategy of sustainable development. I think nuclear power is not the solution to global warming. There are faster, safer, and cheaper ways to meet our energy needs, including renewable energy sources and cogeneration technology which combine heat and power.
All right, the opening I think is fine. The proposition has multiple claims in it. It really needs to be reworked. The content preview, though, was really solid. You state what the supporting points are going to be, and the claims there are a lot more effectively written. You did a good job signposting internally, so it was fairly easy to follow the structure of the speech. The supporting information on the first point on cost was okay. I thought you had a good example on the cost of building the most recent nuclear plant. The cost comparisons for kilowatt hour, I think that needs a little bit more explanation. That information sounded pretty conclusionary, and it doesn't necessarily show that's applicable in widespread applications, which I think is probably the biggest issue that people are going to be concerned about. You did a pretty good job citing your sources on the supporting points. On the danger issue, I actually found that some of your evidence was a little bit contradictory. You have the one example of the amount of exposure that people would be given to radiation near a power plant, and instead of sounding like it was dangerous, it sounded like it was relatively benign, so that was a little strange. On the later point, you've got an argument about a whole bunch of potential environmental harms of nuclear power and uranium mining, for instance. But again, it's a long list of claims. I don't have anything other than the claims there, and on some of it, I'm not even sure that it was a claim being made by an authority. It just is a list of an inventory of things that might be the case. So I think that that's a little bit underdeveloped. You have a tendency to read too much. You want to talk to the audience a little bit more. I thought you had a pretty solid summary, although you're including a lot of different issues, and so I think it's easier to focus on one, fossil fuels, for instance, or excuse me, solar energy, for instance, would probably be the better comparison for you, since that's where most of your time goes into place. But earlier on, you're talking about biomass. At the end, you're talking about cogeneration. And I think as a consequence, you mix some of the issues in a way that's not as clear as it ought to be. All right. Thank you.